the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com. Expert insights on buying and selling farmland in Western Canada.
Welcome back to the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com, where we provide you with expert insights into the process of buying and selling farmland in Western Canada. I'm Devon Davidson, your host and digital media strategist for CLHbid.com. If you haven't already, please take a minute to like, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps us out, and it would be greatly appreciated. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to deal with the rights of first refusal and their impact on farmland sales. And here to help me with that conversation is Roy Carter, CEO of CLHbid.com. Roy, how you doing?
Good. How about you, Devon?
Good. Yeah, good to have you here. And also, Alle Carter, legal and member of the executive team at CLHbid.com. How are you?
Good. Thanks.
Good. Thanks for being here. I guess maybe the first thing we want to cover, just for context in this conversation, is defining what is a right of first refusal, and from a legal standpoint, what sort of obligations are triggered when that's executed. So I don't know, Alle or Roy, who wants to take that first?
I can take a stab at it first.
You bet.
So a right of first refusal, often referred to as a ROFR, R-O-F-R, is a contractual right that the ROFR holder has, and it really comes into effect when the seller of the land is ready to accept a third party's offer. So, for example, if Roy has a ROFR on my land because he's my renter, perhaps,
Right.
And it's in the lease agreement, then maybe you come along and make me an offer because you've heard that maybe I'm interested in selling. Then what happens is I have to give proper notice to Roy as the right of first refusal holder.
Right.
Say, look, Devon made me this offer. These are the terms of that offer, and you have a chance to match them within a specified time frame. And so it's important that, notice has to be given, and then Roy would have to match the material terms of your offer. So that means that if you offer me $500,000 for my quarter with no financing condition, Roy's offer has to be exactly the same as that.
I thought that was really interesting. We're talking about that off air a little bit. How many landowners understand that? Because I think that's important to know is it has to match the material terms, right? Is that a common misconception you're finding?
I would say yes, and I'd say probably the bigger misconception is what is even a ROFR to begin with. Like they don't know the nuances of it, and because they don't know really the effect that it has. Or oftentimes I find people think that a right of first refusal is just who can buy my land. You know, I'm letting maybe my renter buy my land.
Right.
But that's not the case. There's a lot more to it, and we'll discuss later really why it's problematic. Okay.
Well, that's probably a nice segue into the next question I had for you. And how do ROFRs, maybe Roy, I'll give this to you, but how do they hinder the seller's ability to sell their land, and how does it impact the land values as well?
You bet. Maybe we should clarify when we talk about right of first refusal or ROFR, that's probably in the category of the formal one, probably drafted by a law firm, put in the lease, that deals with notice periods and that type of deal. People can refer to ROFRs as, basically I told my tenant I'd give him a chance.
Right.
It might be as, just kind of an oral promise, which is something quite different. Obviously, again, there's often a really good relationship between the landlord and the tenant.
Right.
So why wouldn't they give them a chance, right?
Yep.
They would, it's just normal, and it's probably the first person they're going to go to. So I would say in this discussion, we're really talking about a formal lease with a formal right of first refusal in it, and sort of the legal terms and the effect that might have. It's got a huge negative effect on potential sale in several different areas. One is it takes probably the most motivated buyer out of the equation.
Right.
Secondly is other parties don't waste time even getting financing because they know they can be trumped. And another one is it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it happens where the party holding the ROFR basically tells others, it's my land, basically. Don't make an offer, don't run me up. Mm-hmm. And I think, the fourth category, the effect, it prevents a seller from using a price discovery mechanism to sell their land.
Right.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
So, that's in the last 10 years, that's really been the trend with farmland, going to price discovery, whether it be escalating tender, auction, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And ROFRs come in, centuries ago, before communication.
Right.
And it was really a way to say, you don't have to ride your horse over if you get an offer. I just want to know about it. I don't want to be told that you've sold to somebody else. But with communication nowadays, again, they're going to communicate with the tenant. There's really no need for it. Mm-hmm. But the problem now is because it doesn't mesh with like CLHbid, escalating tender, auction.
Right.
It requires a party to go pick a seller, say a widow, on the farm, to go pick one party to deal with. So she's got to rule out others. She's got to choose. Mm-hmm. And then she takes an offer to the tenant with the ROFR in the lease and presents it to him. And you're basically choosing parties. There's no price discovery. And again, then the tenant gets to park and decide whether he matches or not.
Right.
So it can have enormous effects on the sale in the end, right?
Do you have any specific examples or stories that you've heard or seen? Like, I know obviously with CLH, our advice, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially it's just if you have a ROFR, wait right until the end of the lease. But maybe something that's not associated with CLHbid. Have you seen a scenario where a ROFR's really hindered a sale?
Definitely. We've associated with us, we had one where a lawyer, a law firm did a tender posted a ROFR in it. There was only two tenders, and they were super low. We later sold it without a ROFR for 40% over the highest tender, significantly.
Yeah.
Another sale that we had, the tenant wanted a ROFR. The husband had passed away, and the tenant wanted a ROFR. And the widow asked us about it, and it was like, he can bid. He doesn't need a ROFR nowadays. Right. He can just bid.
Yeah.
She wanted to treat all her neighbors the same. So she advised them that, just bid, right? I'm going to put it out there. It's not like I'm going to sell it out from under you.
Yeah.
It's like he had an equal chance.
For sure.
But somehow the rumor got spread that he had this ROFR. And so we knew what he offered as well to the widow. He went to see her it was actually before the funeral. And we had 7 calls from parties saying, the rumor around our area is this guy's got a ROFR, and if he does, we're not going to touch it.
Right.
And it's like, no, he doesn't have a ROFR, right? And it's like, really? Because we want an email to that effect, because then we'll go get our financing, right? And, that was a good example where if we took those 7 people that contacted us out of the mix, where that would have went. And we can see on the back end, of course, where that tenant bid to and where he stopped and then where everybody else took it. And it was $1 million difference, right?
Wow.
So it can have huge effects. We often say, it can be a couple $100,000 a quarter, a negative effect.
That's significant.
I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this podcast because it's really something that we deal with a lot. And so we can tell sellers all the time, we see that they affect sales, but I was wondering if there's been any research done on it or kind of any data. And I found a study that they did in Germany, and they took 4,000 different auctions. And one set was they had a ROFR on the land, and the other one was that the bidders knew there was no ROFR. And it was established, this was in 2018, that on average, it lowers the sale price by at least 25%.
Wow.
And that's just rough data. And it really limits also the buyers or bidders that even show up on sale day. Yeah. And as Roy alluded to, that's just because why would, going to get financing is quite a cumbersome task.
Yep.
You do all your due diligence. Why would I bother doing that when I know someone's laying in the weeds I'm just a price setter. That's what they feel like.
Totally.
And so at the end of the day, I want people to know that it really, we can tell you that it affects land value, but it has been shown that it does as well.
Well, there's data to support what Roy's saying that, up to maybe 40% difference, right?
Yeah.
So it's safe to say there's really no scenario in which a seller benefits from a ROFR.
No.
No, and I would say, even most tenants would agree that they don't need them. I mean, they agree that seller's got a right to true price discovery and to get fair market value. They're not there to hurt their seller. They're just misconstrued, and they're still around because they were around for 200 years.
Right.
And I think there's a tendency in law offices, this trend of new price discovery is really in the last 10 years. And I think there's a tendency to just say, oh yeah, a ROFR won't hurt you because it's just a right to match.
Right.
And they don't really think through the process that they're not allowed then to use price discovery. They're not allowed to sell with CLHbid. They're forced to go old school, pick one neighbor over the rest. And I don't think it's thought through when they're advised, it's not a big deal in a lease.
Right.
That's the thing I think that surprises me a lot of the times is that quite often the seller either doesn't know that there's a right of first refusal even in their lease or what it means. And I think it's because and nothing bad against law firms. I mean, we're a law firm, but it's just in their boilerplate lease template, this right of first refusal, because it was around for so long. And unless you are educated in ag land, it's very different. And they, as Roy alluded to, they don't think about how that affects the price or the seller, or really takes away the seller's ability to market the land in a way that they want to.
Yeah, it's detrimental to the whole process.
Completely, yeah.
You saying lawyers are lazy and they just use the same form?
We do like our precedents. I will admit that.
That's too funny. I think we touched on this a little bit, and this goes back to an earlier point of yours, Roy, but can a ROFR stand alone, or are they usually tied into a lease? So, and then the other part of that is, if it's poorly written, is it still enforceable by law? Because you had mentioned that sometimes it could just be a verbal agreement, right?
Yeah, I mean, we always ask. It's the first thing, pretty much virtually all the land we sell, I would say 90% of the land we sell is under lease.
Right.
So we want to know what's the term of the lease, is there a ROFR and that type of deal. So normally it's in the lease. It could be standalone and outside of it.
Okay.
But being in the lease, it expires with the lease. They go together. So we normally we always sell in the last year of the lease anyway. So to a large degree, it's a problem if you sell in the fall and there's a ROFR there. We sell and then possession subject to that crop coming off and that. Usually tenants are good and say, well, I'm not going to force you, Mabel, to sell in January, the day the ROFR expires.
Right.
You can sell this fall and I know I can bid. There is the odd exception. It's like, no, I'm going to hold you to it. And I'm going to force you to sell in next year after December 31st. But that is what it is, right?
Yeah, really with our site, you give the same certainty to the ROFR holder that they are aware of the sale, they can participate, and they just have to pay one bid, which is typically $10,000 higher than the second highest bidder.
Yeah.
And it just removes all of the chill almost from the other bidders, where they will show up on sale day and participate as well. I know you asked about the wording of a right of first refusal, and they can be honestly really poorly worded, and the court is really reluctant to disregard them or to have them void for uncertainty because of the wording. They say if it's, a reasonable person can make sense of it, it's probably a good ROFR. And so the two things that they say at the Supreme Court is basically it needs to at minimum have how the price is determined and a reasonable time in which it has to be accepted.
Okay.
So they gave an example of where it said in the ROFR that he had the first option to meet or decline any offer. And it can be confusing because they use the word option, so then you think, is this maybe an option, which we'll talk about later, but that's still a right of first refusal. So I just want people to be wary that it doesn't have to be perfectly worded. And I mean, you could argue on that, but is it worth your time paying lawyers to battle on your right of first refusal? So it's better off not to have it.
If it's been agreed upon, you probably just move forward to that assumption.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a really nice segue, Alle, so thank you for that. So we're going to talk about what is an option in farmland sales and how does it differ from a ROFR?
So an option is a right to acquire an asset at a set price. Okay. So normally you pay for the option. ROFRs are normally not paid for; they're just put into leases. Mm-hmm. But definitely, there should be a price on them if they're affecting the value. But the tendency is to not pay for them, to put them into the lease, which again, as we went over that, how it affects things. An option is a right during a certain period to exercise at a certain price, mm-hmm. or a price that's ascertainable. It might be a formula. So you might have an option to buy Joe's land for 3 years at the average of 2 appraisals, and it might say who the appraisers are. Okay. Or it might say at $500,000. So you cannot sell land with an option on it, because of course somebody else has got the right to buy it.
Can they exercise that option at any point, Roy? Like if it says within a term?
Right. It'll say that the exercise date is X date on the outside, but sometimes that option might be there for 10 or 20 years, right? Right. Which is really a problem if it's a fixed price. Yeah. And they're really, the party holding the option can have their cake and eat it too. If prices go down, they don't exercise. If prices go up, they exercise. Right. So they're not a good thing to enter into, mm-hmm. Unless there's some crazy amount being paid for them. Where we see them a lot with farmland now is on solar projects. Okay. And, it's a bit of bait and switch, or they come to these farmers and they offer, we'll take an option for a solar project. And I think in some cases they probably get credits or carbon credits and different stuff. I don't know what's all behind that. Right. But they sign up a lot of land that'll probably never have a project, but it affects the land because they register a caveat on it where they have an option to then put a solar project on it. Mm-hmm. And often if they exercise, the price is pretty good. But the price they pay each year is nominal. So here they tie up these nice quarters that, if they could ever be irrigated, that's gone. Because somebody's holding an option to put out solar panels out there. Right. And they're not paying very much for it. Yeah. And, some people think, well, if they exercise, look at the windfall. Yeah, but it's a bit of, that's a big if. And, it seems like a lot of the big farmers, they want to have control. They don't want to have options on the land. Yeah. And we actually had one instance of that where we had a sale and we had some potential bidders come and say, can you get rid of that option? Mm-hmm. And it was for solar. Okay. And we actually did go to the party holding the option and offered them a payout. And they took it, discharged the option, and the sale went well. Yeah, I just want people to be careful with options because they might sound friendly. Oh, mm-hmm. I give this person an option. But it gives that individual an interest in your land, and it can be registered on title, and it's right. Just as serious of a thing as a right of first refusal in our minds. So I guess talking in terms of the liability for the seller, like the option can happen at any point within a given term or timeline. And the ROFR is only when I, as a seller, determine that I want to sell. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Exactly, Devon. The ROFR isn't activated. If you get an offer and somebody has a ROFR on your land and you get an offer, you don't have to take it to the party holding your offer, or ROFR, unless you're willing to accept that. Right. You could just decline the offer. Yeah, you can throw offers away until you're ready to accept one, and then it activates the ROFR. Yeah, it almost just sleeps until... Right. It's activated by someone making an offer that you want to accept. Gotcha. Yeah. So Roy, you mentioned it, maybe options with fixed prices. That's obviously sort of a pitfall. What other pitfalls do sellers face when they're granting options? Is there anything else that they should be leery of or aware of? That'd be the big one. It's not common on farmland. It's there, but the big pitfall is ROFRs. You see options a lot more with commercial buildings and that, where a company will lease it, but then they want to have the option to convert that lease into ownership. Mm-hmm. And but the better answer even in that case is when you get the money to buy, come and talk to me, as opposed to setting the price ahead of time and then letting that tenant play with the market.
Right.
And if oil crashes, they don't exercise, and if it goes through the roof, they get this big lift when they exercise, right?
Another type of option, I guess, that you could also have in a lease is in the lease itself. So, for example, if you're leasing my land for 5 years, Devon, and then you have an option to renew for a further 3 years, that's important because now that lease is an 8-year lease.
That's right. Yeah.
So sometimes people think, oh, it's 5 years and then we can figure out the extra 3. No, you've really tied up your land now for
agreed.
8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's also important when drafting a lease.
Yeah. If that were my land, I wouldn't want that, right?
Who knows what's going to happen in 8 years? Things health-wise can change. Maybe you want to sell the land and you can't now.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Alle. And there again, they have their cake and eat it too. If the economy's good and ag prices are good, they exercise.
Yeah.
And if things are in the tank, they say, well, I'm not going to exercise, but you got to reduce the rent, that type of deal. So they can have their cake and eat it too.
Is there any scenarios where options can protect a seller?
No, they're one-sided. That's why you pay for them. So you need to, the price needs to be big in some cases because you're giving up a lot. And that's the anomaly with ROFRs. They're given out freely in law firms, and they shouldn't be, especially with new price discovery. If people want ROFRs, they should pay a big price for them because honestly, nowadays they don't need them. They can bid.
Right.
And, if they demand a ROFR in today's world where people are using somebody like CLHbid, it begs the question of what they want. Are they trying to force that person to sell it below market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd almost ask why. Why do you want a ROFR? If it's to avoid, maybe you're a really good renter of mine. If it is to avoid conflict down the road, if I go to sell, well, then a process like CLHbid takes that away anyways because you have an opportunity. So really, in my mind, the only reason would be you want to buy it below market value because nowadays you know the land's being marketed.
Yeah.
And so that's often you have a good one that if your tenant or renter wants a right of first refusal, you can give it to them, but say that you're allowed to sell using a true price discovery platform like CLHbid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see that more often, Devon, where, kind of, I would say people in the know of what's going on out there, they'll do leases where they'll give ROFRs, but it says that it only applies if it's basically a direct sale and not a public sale, either by auction or escalating tender.
Right.
So there's still protection there. It can't be sold in the night. So that owner's got to keep their word too to put it out there. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a ROFR, but it's within certain boundaries. That if it's not sold on the public market or like on CLHbid, that it still applies. And you're starting to see that more in leases because people are starting to realize the effect of a ROFR.
Right. I think we wanted to dive into a little bit of actionable advice for sellers. So one question I had is if I've inherited land, and I think you maybe alluded to it earlier, Alle, but how do I find out if a ROFR option applies if I've inherited that land? Is that something that comes up during the transition process?
Sometimes not. I would say it's worth having your lawyer review the lease that's in place or the title. Pull title, see what's registered on there. Pull the caveat itself because if it's registered, and see the expiration of it. That's a big one, and what the terms are.
Okay.
The worst there, you see a will where mom or dad give 20 quarters to 4 different kids.
Right.
And then it's stipulated that they got to give ROFRs to the other kids.
Oh, okay.
And it's just an absolute mess. So they get their 4 or 5 quarters, but then they got to give ROFRs to the other siblings. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's 3 or 4.
Yeah. And
they're not tied to a lease. And it's a huge problem for liquidity on those people trying to sell the 4 or 5 quarters they get. Because they can't use auction, they can't use like escalating tender.
Right.
They don't really know the locals that they should be selling to, but they got to run these offers all the time to their siblings.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it comes from, but you see it. It's kind of like, I think, old school mom or dad trying to keep the land in the family.
Right.
And I'll give it to you, but I sort of want strings on it.
Yeah.
And if you go to sell it, you got to go deal with your siblings. Yeah. But it's not a good situation.
So what's your advice to them then? If I've inherited this land and now I found out that there's ROFRs that I have to deal with, or there's options on it, like are there any courses of action where I can have those voided or removed? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, they could get them, they could all agree to, notwithstanding what mom or dad said,
right,
let's get rid of the strings and, prevent the trying to control from the grave.
Yeah.
And let's give up our ROFRs on each other and give, instead of tying us at the hip.
Yeah.
They could definitely do that.
Okay.
And we find too, because we often do deal with the renter if there is a right of first refusal on, and just have a good conversation with them and say, look, the seller is 80 years old, is having health problems. Maybe they want to sell their land with CLHbid. We understand that you have a right of first refusal. How can we make this work? And for the most part, they're very understanding. Right. And they will say, you know what? I totally understand. If it goes on your platform, I have the opportunity to bid 5 or 10,000 higher than the second highest guy, and I think that's fair. Okay. So we do take that off the seller's hands and try to deal with renters or family members on that.
Okay. And let's say that I'm an active farmer and I'm negotiating some new leases. What's some advice you can provide there? Obviously, maybe review the boilerplate. But beyond that, what else can we look at?
Don't put one in, or as we said earlier, carve out that this only applies if it's, a over the table type deal. It's not going to auction or escalating tender. And also the terms of it and what land it applies to. Does it apply to your whole farm? Does it apply to one quarter?
Right.
All of that's really important, I would say.
Okay.
And don't make long leases. I think that's another one. So if you have the option in there of renewing for a further 3 years or something, that's getting to be a really long lease.
I was going to say maybe just some long-term planning, right? Like just really think about what your goals and your plans are for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And understand the lease itself. Just because you're paying a professional to write it up, it's sometimes they don't understand your situation or farms themselves. So get a couple opinions.
Yeah, these tenants, they got, big inputs, rotation, big decisions. They need certainty too. I mean, certainty in business is everything.
Yeah.
So it's got to work for both sides. But we are starting to see more and more, if they want longer term, that's okay. And, you're not going to go lease it to somebody else. But having said that, if you want to sell and have an event, whether it be for health or maybe your kids or somebody's sick, then often there's the ability nowadays, a break fee or, to terminate.
Right.
That it only applies in the event of a sale. And often it only applies after a couple of years into the lease. So you might have a 5-year lease, but it says after year 2, on 6 months notice or whatever, I've got the right to sell and terminate. And we talked about that in another episode. But in that case, then there's some compensation, a break fee, might be that year's rent.
Right.
But it's not just there to allow people to break leases. It's a game-changing event. It's a sale of their farm.
Right.
But things change in life. And it allows them to, gives the tenant some certainty. He's got a certain term.
Right.
He's also got a right to buy. It's not sold out from under him. And we're starting to see more and more of that work where it's give and take between the tenant and the owner.
Yeah, you've given the seller, the owner, some flexibility moving forward.
Totally.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. How does CLHbid.com handle these situations different relative to private sales, traditional real estate or public auction? If there's ROFRs or options. I mean, if I go to public auction and there's a ROFR or something, or traditional real estate, how is that approached differently?
Traditional real estate, they'll list land with a ROFR on it. I would think there's probably not much interest in it because, again, you just think you're probably wasting your time.
Sure.
I can't say I've seen any auction houses list with a ROFR because generally when the hammer's down, it's sold, and a ROFR doesn't allow that. There's a 14-day or 21-day period after that.
Right.
So it's a big restriction that needs to be adjusted, given the new price discovery methods out there to sell farmland.
I have seen it with tenders before, or with now realtors are trying to do those progressive tenders that we talked about before. And so they won't tell the individuals tendering that there is a right of first refusal on the land, which is just problematic in itself. So then everyone wastes their time tendering, which we know isn't a good price discovery process anyways. And they submit their tenders and then they've just set the price for the right of first refusal holder.
Right.
So yeah, I have seen that.
Okay. I've got one more here, and I'll direct this to both of you. What's one thing you would want landowners or farmers to understand about ROFRs? What would their takeaway be from this episode? One thing if they took away from it.
I would say that it significantly lowers the value that you will get for your farmland, and that the same goal can be achieved by providing your tenant or your neighbor or your family member the certainty that they'll get a chance at it by marketing it on a true price discovery platform. You know, the same goal is achieved, but you're not scaring off all the other interested parties, and you're maximizing value for your land, which you deserve.
Okay.
I would say little different than that, but they're both. I would say it takes away their right to treat neighbors fairly and equally, which is pretty important to people. It's almost as important as the price they get. Alle was talking about the price. It affects their ability to maximize.
Yep.
The other one, ROFR, prevents them from dealing with everybody and allowing everybody a chance.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. So those two deals, it affects price plus the way you deal with neighbors. It's a big deal.
Awesome.
Tugging at everyone's heartstrings, Roy.
I love it. Yeah. No, but valid points.
Very
both
true.
of them, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's all that I have for today. Anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we take off?
That's good, Devon.
That's going to do it. Okay. Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Alle. Really appreciate it. That's going to do it for another edition of the Farmland Exchange. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate the support. As I said at the top of the show, if you haven't already, please like, rate, and review. Those 5-star reviews really help us, and it is appreciated. If you have any questions or there's topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, or if you're interested in selling farmland with CLHbid.com, please take a minute, send us an email at info@clhbid.com, or give us a call at 866-263-7480. Hopefully you found some value in this today. That's going to do it for now. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this has been a positive exchange for you.